The presidential campaign of Vice President Kamala Harris has gotten off to a great start. A rush of enthusiasm about her stepping up to become the nominee after President Joe Biden decided not to seek a second term after all. A ton of excitement surrounding her selection of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate. Lots of positivity coming out of the Democratic National Convention a couple of weeks ago, and now, because the Harris campaign started so late, we're already heading into the home stretch, sprinting to Election Day on November 5th. Polls, both nationally and in crucial swing states, seem to be trending in Harris's favor, and though signs still point to a close election, it also looks to be a very winnable election for Harris and the Democrats, which is good news for everyone who isn't just a gigantic piece of shit. However, despite the success of the Harris campaign thus far, despite the enthusiasm the candidacy of Kamala Harris has inspired, and despite the harrowing and hilarious tailspin into which it has sent the Trump campaign, there are still questions about the Harris campaign. Good questions. Legitimate questions, but some of these questions are a lot easier to answer than the people asking them make them out to be. The question I hear being asked most frequently about the Harris campaign is, where are the policies? Since Biden announced that he was stepping down and Harris was stepping up as the Democratic Party candidate, the excitement and positivity have been so high that the campaign has, understandably, mostly been riding that. It's been described as a vibes-based campaign. Republicans have tried to attack Harris on that basis, accusing her of running on vibes because she has no ideas, no practical solutions to the nation's problems. Journalists have adopted a more neutral attitude of detached concern. In a New York Times article with the headline, "Harris's Early Campaign, Heavy on Buzz, Light on Policy," originally published August 19, Reed Epstein writes, quote, "When Hillary Clinton ran for president in 2016, she had more than 200 distinct policy proposals. 4 years ago, Joseph R. Biden Jr. had a task force write a 110-page policy document for his White House bid. Now, Vice President Kamala Harris does not have a policy page on her campaign website." This is true. If you go to the Kamala Harris campaign website, you'll find it to be, as of this recording anyway, kind of bare. Solicitations for donations, biographies of Harris and Walz, links to opportunities to get more directly involved with the campaign. But that's about it. No issues section. In an op-ed piece for The Hill, published August 26, Beckett Adams writes, quote, "If you think the news coverage of Vice President Kamala Harris's presidential campaign is frustratingly paper-thin, you're not alone. We know little about her current policy positions or what she'd pursue as president. But let's not be too hard on the journalists. The lack of robust news coverage is mostly down to the Harris campaign being a hollow shell, constructed entirely from feelings and emotions. It's good vibes all the way through. It's hard for the media to cover something that isn't there." Adams then goes on to mention the fact that Harris has yet to sit for an interview with a journalist since becoming the nominee, though by the time you see this video, she will have done so. As I am writing this script, it was announced that Harris and Walz would be interviewed on CNN on August 29th. Adams also comments on the pitiful state of coverage of the Harris campaign, lamenting how major outlets such as the New York Times, the Atlantic, and the LA Times have been reduced to publishing articles about her laugh or what a good cook she is. Adams writes, quote, "The coverage is terrible, and we're drowning in endless joy nonsense, but that's not entirely on the press. An evident lack of substance is why, in defense of the Democratic nominee, certain journalists and commentators have taken to speculating about the policies Harris may or may not pursue as president. They can't outright defend her vision because they just don't know what she really believes. When the Democrat runs a vibes-only campaign, speculation is all you have left." Here's my problem with this. Because it's not completely unfair, the Harris campaign has been focused way more on optimistic abstract concepts like joy and change and building a better future than on specific policies. But, one, This is hardly the first political campaign to prefer uplifting vagueness to leading with concrete policy proposals. 2, it's working. The Harris campaign is doing extremely well so far, and why would they change what's working when the whole point is to, win the goddamn election? And 3, while it's definitely been a vibes first campaign so far, it's not vibes only. There is a more substantial side to Harris's candidacy and the broader campaign of the Democratic Party, if you know where to look. And journalists and pundits who are complaining about this should know where to look to find the specific policies Harris and the Democrats are running on, because they're in the same place they always are. During the Democratic National Convention, the assembled delegates officially adopted a party platform. They do this every 4 years. The Democrats do. The Republicans didn't bother to adopt a new platform in 2020. They just reused the one from 2016 and blamed it on COVID. Weird how COVID didn't stop the Democrats from drafting and adopting a new platform in 2020. The 2024 Democratic Party platform is available for free online through the Democratic Party's website, as well as other sources. I'll link to it in the video description as well. It's 92 pages. It was drafted before Harris became the presumptive nominee, so there are still a bunch of references to Biden being the candidate, but the policies are what are important, right? That's what these journalists and commentators who are complaining about the vibes-only Harris campaign want to know about. The policies. What are the Democrats going to do if they win? They write about it here for 92 pages. Granted, not every word on these 92 pages is devoted to laying out specific policy proposals. There's a lot of touting President Biden's record. There are sections drawing contrasts between the principles and priorities of the Democrats and those of the Republicans. There are lots of generalities. On page 7, in the chapter devoted to the economy, the platform reads, Democrats will keep fighting to prevent the kind of supply chain shocks and corporate greed that have done so much to raise prices, and will keep investing in American workers, American jobs, and American families, bringing factories home to win the race for the future. All of which sounds good. All of which I support, but it's more of a statement of intent than a specific policy proposal. There's a good deal of that throughout the platform, as there are in all party platforms, but there are also lots of those specific policy proposals which political journalists and pundits eagerly and sincerely crave. For example, on page 9, still in the economy chapter, quote, Democrats will keep fighting to pass the Protecting the Right to Organize Act to give everyone the right to organize for better pay, benefits, and working conditions, and to hold abusive bosses accountable for violating workers' rights. Later in the same paragraph, quote, will work to pass the Public Service Freedom to Negotiate Act, guaranteeing public sector bargaining rights, and to codify a right to organize for domestic workers, farm workers, and other unprotected laborers. Not just particular issues that the Democrats want to take a particular action regarding, but specific pieces of legislation the party is pledging to pass, and which implicitly Kamala Harris is pledging to sign as president. On page 13, quote, will keep pushing to restore the expanded child tax credit and earned income tax credit, which proved so effective at reducing poverty before Republicans let them expire. Will work to finally raise the federal minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. Will fight for paid leave, better health care, and more investment in public schools and affordable housing. Will further expand public transit, connecting communities that have been cut off for too long, and will continue to reject Republican proposals to increase poverty by making devastating cuts to programs that vulnerable Americans count on. That's not quite as specific as the previous examples, no mention of actual bills they want to pass, but still, particular issues, particular policies, expanding the child tax credit and earned income tax credit, paid leave, investment in public schools, investment in affordable housing, investment in public transportation, resisting Republican efforts to cut social welfare programs, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Sure, the Democrats have been trying to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour for so long that by the time they finally do it, they'll have to immediately start pushing to raise it again because $15 an hour ain't what it used to be. But still, specific policy, specific goals. From page 15 in Chapter 2, which is devoted to tax policy, Democrats will protect everyone earning less than $400,000 a year from any tax increase, and we will fight to protect and expand other tax benefits for working people and families with children. From further down the same page and continuing on to page 16, Democrats will make billionaires pay a minimum income tax rate of 25%, raising $500 billion in 10 years. Will end the preferential treatment for capital gains for millionaires, so they pay the same rate on investment income as on wages. We'll put an end to abusive life insurance tax shelters and stop billionaires from exploiting retirement tax incentives that are supposed to help middle-class families save. We'll eliminate the stepped-up basis loophole for the wealthiest Americans so they can't avoid paying taxes on their wealth by passing it down to heirs. Democrats will close the carried interest loophole, which wealthy fund managers have long used to halve tax rates on their own personal pay so they pay a lower rate than some teachers or firefighters do. That's wrong. And will increase our new stock buyback tax to 4% to discourage stock buybacks that benefit executives and wealthy shareholders instead of workers and consumers. Again, no mention of particular pieces of legislation, but clear, specific policies with numbers attached. What do the Democrats intend to do regarding taxes? This. They wrote it down. The whole platform contains that kind of policy. In the chapter on lowering costs, it states that Democrats support expanding Medicaid, increasing federal investment in mobile and rural health clinics, increasing regulations designed to prevent surprise billing, expanding prescription drug price caps that currently only apply to seniors on Medicare to apply to everyone, and requiring drug manufacturers that raise prices faster than the rate of inflation pay the difference back into Medicare. That chapter also describes a plan to make housing more affordable by expanding federal rent assistance, forcing corporate landlords to cap rent increases at 5% or else lose federal tax breaks, and tax credits and down payment assistance for first-time homebuyers. Regarding education, the platform proposes making community college and trade school free for all Americans, increasing investment in historically black colleges and universities, expanding Pell Grants to increase the maximum award and make them available to millions more students, continuing to push for student debt relief, and giving public school teachers a raise and providing additional supports for teachers and other school personnel to make working in public education a more sustainable profession. Climate change. The platform proposes continuing to expand investment in clean energy, investing in long overdue upgrades to the power grid, and, on page 31, to help find new ways of generating and storing energy, reducing emissions, and boosting climate resilience, we'll launch an Advanced Research Projects Agency for Climate, ARPA-C, modeled on the Defense Research Agency that's behind breakthrough technologies like the Internet and GPS, and the new ARPA-H that the administration created to transform medicine. We'll also establish a new national lab for climate research and innovation affiliated with an HBCU, Hispanic, or other minority-serving institution to ensure the opportunities of the future are available to everyone and built by everyone. And we will continue to invest in climate research across NASA, NOAA, the National Science Foundation, and other agencies to make sure that America leads the world in clean energy innovation. Page 33, continuing to page 34, will require that low-carbon materials and clean power be used in all new federal buildings by 2030, and invest in upgrading VA hospitals, federal offices, and K-12 public school and community college buildings, making them innovative, energy-efficient, and safe places to learn. To help people deal with the ongoing effects of climate change and build more climate-resilient communities, from page 36, going forward, Democrats will work to pass the bipartisan Disaster Resilience Tax Credit to help low- and middle-income families and small businesses invest in preparing for and easing the impact of storms, heat, flood, and other natural disasters. From the chapter on gun regulation and criminal justice reform, page 40, Democrats will establish universal background checks, a step supported by the vast majority of Americans, including gun owners. We will once again ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. We will require safe storage for guns. Democrats will end the gun industry's immunity from liability, so gun makers can no longer escape accountability. We will pass a national red flag law to prevent tragedies by keeping weapons out of dangerous hands. We will increase funding to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms for enforcement and prosecution, and to the Federal Bureau of Investigation for firearm background checks. And because the gun violence epidemic is a public health crisis, we will fund gun violence research across the Centers for Disease Control and National Institutes of Health, as well as community violence interventions. Page 42, Democrats will take action to expunge federal marijuana-only convictions. We will combat drug trafficking and expand the use of drug courts, interventions, and diversion for people with substance abuse disorders. We will fund a new accelerating justice system reform grant program to provide jurisdictions with critical resources to foster community trust and safety, reduce inequity and justice system involvement, and alleviate burdens on police. We will expand access to public defenders and step up civil rights enforcement, including by boosting funding for the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division and hiring 50 new assistant U.S. attorneys. Page 44, we continue to strengthen the Violence Against Women Act, keep guns out of the hands of domestic abusers, and expand housing and legal services for survivors. To keep students safe on campus, we will work with schools to implement and enforce Title IX and end sexual harassment and assault in our nation's schools. We will eliminate the rape kit backlog, and we will strengthen legal protections for and support survivors of deepfake image-based sexual abuse, building on the federal civil cause of action established under the President's reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act in 2022. Page 48, on voting rights, Democrats will pass and President Biden, now presumably President Harris, will sign the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act to fully secure the right to vote in every state, ensure fair congressional maps for every American, modernize and secure our elections, and curtail the corrupting influence of money in politics. Page 50 on reproductive rights. With a Democratic Congress, we will pass national legislation to make Roe the law of the land again. We will strengthen access to contraception so every woman who needs it is able to get and afford it. We will protect a woman's right to access IVF. We will repeal the Hyde Amendment. And in his second term, President Biden, again, presumably President Harris will do the same thing here, will continue to support access to FDA-approved medication abortion, appoint leaders at the FDA who respect science, and appoint judges who uphold fundamental freedoms. Page 51, women's rights. Democrats will work to pass the Paycheck Fairness Act and end pay inequity not just in the federal workforce, but throughout the economy, with penalties for companies that discriminate against women. Page 53, racial equity. By investing in community lenders, we're driving an estimated $130 billion more in loans to Black and Latino communities over the next decade. Going forward, we'll double that funding for community development financial institutions and expand and make permanent a new markets tax credit to encourage development in places too long left behind. Page 56, LGBTQ equality. Democrats will pass the Equality Act to codify protections for LGBTQI+ Americans and their families. We will prohibit employment discrimination in the federal government, including contractors, and make federally funded seniors programs LGBTQI+ inclusive. Page 62, Arts and Humanities. Democrats will fund the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and art and music education in public schools. Page 63, D.C. statehood. We unequivocally support statehood for D.C. Same page, representation for Puerto Rico and other U.S. territories. Democrats support the enactment of the Puerto Rico Status Act, H.R. 2757, and promote full civic and political representation for Puerto Ricans. We will work to end its unequal treatment by the federal government and fight to provide equal access to federal programs like Medicaid, SNAP, and the CTC. Democrats also support self-determination for the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa. We will create a congressional task force to study equal voting rights and House representation, and we will work to ensure equal access to federal programs like Veterans Benefits, the Affordable Care Act, Medicaid, and SNAP food assistance for all those eligible. Democrats support funding to improve critical health care facilities in the territories, including construction of a state-of-the-art medical complex in Guam that co-locates health agencies on a single campus for a more integrated healthcare system that will benefit the region. I'm only on page 63, y'all. This goes on for almost 30 more pages. I'm only quoting bits that refer to specific policies or the intention to address specific issues. I won't go through the whole thing. I think you get the idea. There's a link to the entire document in the video description. Read it if you're interested. I'm sure you won't like everything in it. I don't. I'm sure there will be policies or proposals in there which you think don't go far enough. I know I felt that way about some of the platform when I read it. But it's there, in writing. And while there is a lot of looking back at the accomplishments of the Biden administration and some generic Democrats will fight for X, Y, and Z sort of promises, there are also a ton of specifics. Are Kamala Harris and Tim Walz out there on the campaign trail giving wonky, policy-based speeches? No. Is the Harris campaign focusing more on joy and vibes than on reading out the party platform like I've just been doing? Yes. But it is utterly disingenuous to claim, as Beckett Adams does in that op-ed for The Hill, that we have no idea what Kamala Harris believes or what she will do as president, or that this campaign is the political equivalent of Seinfeld, a show about nothing. And you know, for all the complaining from commentators like Adams about how thin the coverage has been of the vibes-only Harris campaign, I think it might be giving the current crop of American political journalists a bit too much credit to assume that the coverage would be any better if they were focusing on the issues and policies rather than the vibes. In that same New York Times article I referred to earlier, the one with the headline calling the Harris campaign heavy on buzz, light on policy, where he observes that the Harris website lacks a policy page, Reed Epstein spends most of the story writing about policy. Epstein describes how, even though she doesn't usually go into too much detail, Harris's stump speech is full of policy proposals. Quote, as president, she says she would seek to increase the minimum wage, introduce more robust child care and paid family leave programs, and keep down the cost of groceries, housing, and prescription drugs. She has endorsed the bipartisan border security bill that former President Donald J. Trump helped tank early this year, and the voting rights bill that House Democrats passed in 2021, only for it to run aground in the Senate. And Ms. Harris also calls for new gun control measures and makes an applause line out of her support for enshrining abortion rights into federal law. Epstein goes on, quote, on Friday, August 16th, after 3 weeks of delivering roughly the same stump speech, Ms. Harris made her first foray into policy with an economic address in North Carolina. She called for extending the child tax credit, including a $6,000 credit for parents in the first year of a child's life, proposed $40 billion in tax incentives for new housing construction, and endorsed a federal ban on price gouging, though she offered few details on how it would work. That article by Reed Epstein includes a link to another article by Reed Epstein from late July about how Kamala Harris has changed her positions on certain issues since she ran as a candidate in the Democratic presidential primary in 2020. For a candidate who is light on policy, it sure seems like journalists know a lot about her policies and are perfectly capable of writing about those policies when they want to. The thing is, and this is just my own speculation, so take it for whatever it's worth, writing about policy is boring. Fewer people are going to click on a link or buy a newspaper or listen to a podcast or watch a video to find out about the policy proposals of a given candidate. It's way more interesting to tell people about how the candidate they're all excited about now is fucking up and headed for a disaster. Crisis is sexy. Chaos is sexy. someone stumbling and falling, or predicting that someone will stumble and fall any second now, that gets attention. Sober and detailed presentations of legislation you support and policies you intend to enact if elected? Not so much. So, I get it. I hate it, and I do not excuse it, let's be clear, but I get it. Except, if Kamala Harris is running on vibes only, if Kamala Harris's campaign is supposedly light on ideas and solutions, what the hell do you call the Trump campaign? I showed you this year's Democratic Party platform. There it is, 92 pages. The Republican Party's platform, they did bother to draft one this time, is 16 pages. I'll link it in the video description as well, so if you're interested, you can compare. Democrats, Republicans. Which one seems more substantial to you? 92 pages, that's the length of a feature film screenplay. 16 pages. That's 3 pages more than the length of the script for this video. I guess the Republicans figured they could afford to skimp on the platform since they already spent over 900 pages describing their fascist wet dreams in Project 2025. But hey, see for yourself. Read them both. Read the Democratic Party platform, read the Republican Party platform, and you tell me which one has more policies and solutions. You tell me which one seems like the work of serious people wanting to govern, and which one seems like a hastily assembled, intellectually vapid, undercooked, overwrought fascist propaganda pamphlet. Better yet, since most of the "where are the policies" complaints about Harris are referring specifically to her campaign events and not the party platform, watch Kamala Harris give a speech at one of her rallies, then watch Trump give a speech at one of his Bund meetings, and tell me which candidate spent more time proposing practical solutions to problems that actually affect people's lives, and which candidate used the time to rant and ramble about the same shit they've been complaining about for almost 10 years. Why is the story Kamala Harris's campaign is about style over substance, and Kamala Harris is running on vibes, not policy? Why is that what I've heard over and over and over again from the mainstream political media for the last month and a half, while hearing practically nothing from those same mainstream outlets about how utterly empty the Trump campaign is? If Harris is running on vibes is considered a valid take, surely Trump is running on vibes is just as valid. The only difference being that Harris is running on good vibes like joy and optimism, and Trump is running on grievance, resentment, and fear. So why aren't we getting that story? Why are we constantly hearing about how light on policy Harris is when Trump and the Republicans are far lighter on policy, and when Trump or one of his surrogates does talk about specific policies he would enact as president, it's always something equal parts preposterous and horrifying, like wanting to arrest millions of people who are or are suspected of being undocumented immigrants and hold them indefinitely in military concentration camps near the border until they can be deported, a project which would take years, if not decades, to accomplish, and is also, Nazi shit. A little more balance. That's all I'm asking for. And a little more honesty. If you really care about what Harris and the Democrats' policies are, they're easy to find. If you're a journalist and you want to report on that, report on it. I wish you would. If you have questions for Harris about specific policies, ask her about them. Again, I wish you would. Interrogate her about policy. Challenge her about policy. Go for it. But do the same for Trump. Admittedly, actually discovering specific policies proposed by Trump's campaign will be more difficult, but not impossible. Journalism is not just important, it's vital to a healthy, functioning democracy. The public needs to be informed. We need to know what our representatives and leaders are doing, and what those who are running for those offices intend to do if elected. So if you're a political journalist, especially one who writes for a major mainstream outlet, report on that, please. But if you don't, at least stop insulting our intelligence by pretending that the reason you aren't writing more substantive stories about the Harris campaign is because there is no substance to be found. You know, I know, we all know, that's horseshit.